a webinar series brought to you by CIM Magazine and the CIM Health and Safety Society. I am your organizer, Michelle Beacom, Managing Editor of CIM Magazine. Today's presentation is Leading Safety Activities and Indicators Towards Zero Harm and is sponsored by Hudbay Minerals. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. To ensure that you have optimal audio, if you joined by computer, make sure you've selected the computer button. If you joined by phone, make sure you've selected the phone button. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box under the question mark in your GoToWebinar control panel. The questions will be held until the end. Note that we will have some poll questions during the presentation, so please pay attention. Now I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. We are excited to be partnering with the Health and Safety Society to be able to bring this series to you. I'm very happy to have with us John to host today. John is president of Automate Mining, and he is an executive member of CIM's Health and Safety Society. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'm excited about the topic. We're going to be talking about leading activities and safety. And there's been quite a bit of work on items such as SIF prevention or critical risk, which I think is really good. But this one, we want to get back focusing really on what are some of the leading activities we can do as an industry to help move safety forward and getting away from lagging indicators as the measure or the focus. And, many years ago, this was one of the big themes. Want to make sure we keep that initiative going towards it. And so very happy today to have John O'Shaughnessy and Benoit Massicot with me. John is the VP of Hudbay's Manitoba Business Unit. He oversees the strategic and operational performance of all the company's activities in that region. He's an accomplished leader, and he's worked in provinces from Ontario all the way across to Newfoundland, brings a vast array of leadership experience and safety experience to the webinar. So thanks, John. And Benoit Massicot, very, very highly trained in safety, started out as a health and safety intern, and has worked his way up to Director of Health and Safety for Agnico Eagle's Canadian operations. So that's great to have him as well there too. The other great thing is he's got a degree in management and health and safety certificate. So he brings the process and the management side along with the actual safety aspect. So I think we're in for a great discussion today. And so maybe I'll just kick it off talking a little bit about leading activities and leading indicators. And so the indicators are the measures of what's taking place. Much like for lagging activities, injury frequency is one. So today, not as much around the leading indicators, but the activities. What work can we do at the mine site that's going to drive safety improvement going forward? And for me, one of the key things is the safety plan to develop that. So the safety plan in itself is a leading activity, and how that safety plan gets developed and what you put in it determines how many leading activities or how many lagging activities in there. If your safety plan is only to follow up on all the injuries and do the action from injury results, then it's not really leading activity, it's lagging activities. But there are some leading activities you can put into your safety plan. And so John, maybe I'll start with you. If you think about a safety plan and starting to develop it, what's one of the key leading activities that you'd like to see or you think is useful in a safety plan?
Yeah, John, definitely agree. So when it comes to sort of prescribing safety plans on an annual basis, I think industry is pretty standardized on risk-based observations, field level inspections, audits. But when it comes to humanizing the safety system, I do think it's a real positive requirement. And I think as an industry, we really need to keep being intentional on having things like visible felt leadership as an item in the safety plan. And some of the reasons for that, for myself, anytime I've seen organizations that make significant changes in how some of those lagging indicators move, it's always associated with some of the visible felt leadership safety indicators on prescriptive levels. And in my mind, it sort of describes how an organization and on a personal level, how people show up and how they humanize the safety system, because the system's just a system, and there's a piece around caring that sometimes get lost. And lots of organizations have implemented visible felt leadership to demonstrate the values that the organizations have. The other benefit of having a prescribed visible felt leadership for myself is it really forces people to be uncomfortable, because it's not normal for people to have caring conversations in an industry like mining. And I think being prescriptive on having those conversations, the more you practice it, the more you get better at it. And from my earlier days in mining, I know, John, you spent, probably it wasn't called visible felt leadership, but at the time, layered interactive discussions where you actually spent time with the leaders and continued to develop them. The other piece, the experience for the employees. So the employees, if you have a prescribed visible felt leadership system, one of the unintended consequences, which I see as being positive, is the experience for the employee is somewhat uniform across all leaders that show up in the field. So I think it's a way that, can move things forward and everybody can align on people going home safe.
Thanks, John. Benoit, anything you want to add to that before we move on?
Yes, maybe just to continue about the safety plan and visible felt leadership. What we are doing right now is to try to standardize a little bit the approach in our safety plan. So the majority of our site right now have a kind of standardized safety plan. I say that the majority of the site, because in the last few years we are in merge and acquisition, so we are still in the process to standardize few things. But in terms of safety plan, we try to have a kind of frame around it and make sure, for example, we have in our safety plan an objective and target section. Very important to set what is our objective in terms of leading indicator. And also, we also have a section on how we will measure it, very important. And I think at the end, it's to structure your plan to make sure you're able to gather the information you need about it. So, yes.
Perfect. And I'll get back to the safety plan on you with another question, but I want to get back to just John's point. He mentioned about, layered audits. It brings me back to when I was a supervisor underground, and we were having a safety consultant come in to look at our operations. And being a young supervisor, I knew they were coming in, so took the crews off production, make sure everything was cleaned up, get all the housekeeping as best as it could be, because the safety professionals coming down. And so after 2 days of preparing, when they come down, I feel pretty good about how the conditions look. And you never want to factor that, but as you're getting ready, this is what was done, right or wrong. And so the safety professional from outside that has never been at our company before walks in, comes down to the workplace, and he's got with us the manager of the mine, the head of safety, himself and myself, and reaches into a crew member. And, to John's point about felt leadership, he starts with a conversation to get to know the individual on a personal level, see what their game, what their family's like, what they enjoy doing. He looks around and he says, wow, the conditions in here, they look amazing. This is great. And I'm feeling pretty good. And then he turns the question and said, but it's probably not always like this. Maybe just describe, sometimes where things don't go as planned and there's something you need to do that's maybe not within the rules. Like, what do you do? And that open discussion created such confidence. The individuals talked about some of the procedures he needs to do that are against standards to get things done in front of, the manager, the head of safety. And it just floored me on how being in the field, creating that discussion, and not just looking at what's around you, but actually having an open discussion with individuals about what prevents them from doing their job or what are some barriers, really provide lots of wisdom. And to me, that was why open-ended discussions or layered audits really had a lot of value in my life, not just on the workplace conditions, but the discussions with people. So, I think it's really good that you balance that out. And so, Benoit, maybe I'll get back to you on the safety plans. In there, we prescribe some stuff like open-ended audits that you would need to do. But there's a balance, especially if you look at a company like Agnico that's growing and it has some acquisitions. Everybody is bringing in a lot of things from their safety plan or, whatever they call it. What do you do as an organization at either a global level or a Canadian level to help balance, what gets prescribed and where provide flexibility to the operation so they can make the most effective use of their safety plan.
Yes, and I was talking a little bit before. Yes, our safety plan, we try to have a kind of a frame around it. The frame is based on 15 pillars. So, and those 15 pillars, we have it in our safety plan, but inside of those pillars, so we let the latitude to decide to put what they need. And I don't know if it's the best thing to do, but I'm just sharing what we are doing in the majority of our operation. And I think that approach brings some positive and also give the latitude to decide to become better than having strict guidance you can give as a corporation. And for example, visible felt leadership objective is mandatory at ANICO to have it in place at all the sites since 2025. It's quite new for us. So has a guidance from the corporation, but yes, many leading indicators such as coaching, health and safety meetings, behaviors, interaction, inspection, and all the classic one, was already in place in the operation, but nothing consistent across the business. So we have in place, like many other company, an annual bonus. So for staff people, in the past, the calculation was based only on lagging indicator. 20% of the bonus is based on the health and safety performance. And we have other metrics like environment, community relation, production, and other aspect we take in consideration in the calculation. But before 2025, so all the performance was based on the TRIFR and the global combined injury frequency. So for the first time this year, 10% is based on visible felt leadership objective and the completion of the ICAM investigation, because we think it's very important, and we just implement this a year ago. And maybe to wrap up our approach right now, it's really to give a frame and let the site the opportunity to innovate and play inside of that frame. And for the objective, the sites define in terms of visible felt leadership. So we let them the latitude to decide which one they want to have, depending of their reality, where they are. The objective in terms of visible felt leadership will be not necessarily the same in Nunavut and in Mexico. So we left a little bit of latitude again to let the site the opportunity to innovate and become better than the strict guidance we will provide. And I think on that way, we are able to become better as a company. And yes, it's mostly the approach we have and the culture we have on that side.
No, I think that sounds great. And what I'm really intrigued with, and I might get you to follow up a little bit more, Benoit, is you talk about the flexibility to put in the plan so different regions can do different things, but kind of based on 15 pillars, which I think is great. Maybe what's a couple of those pillars, or could you give a couple of examples of what those pillars might be when you discuss it?
Why the pillars, for example, in the plan, so you can have a policy. It's one of the pillar, and it's not only about leading indicator, but one of those pillar can be the legal aspect, the risk management, the management of change, objective and targets, for example, role and responsibility of the different level, competence and training. So it's some example of those pillars then in the safety plan we have. And inside of it, the site need to put the information on how it works at their site in terms of risk management. So we have some system procedure, for example, in risk management to set some general guidance, but after that, the site need to adapt to their needs and their reality. So having those 15 pillars based on our risk management and safety system help to have a kind of consistency between the sites, but also to give the latitude to them to adjust to their reality. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I'm even thinking about myself now with, you know, some of the work I'm doing about implementing new technology. Like, change management is huge, and I would have never thought about how change management fits into a safety plan. But that's a great leading activity on change management in a safety plan. So just showing it as a pillar and saying, okay, what are the changes going on, and how can you proactively look at managing those changes in a safety plan, I think is amazing. So that's a great example. Thanks. John, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah. Again, meeting Benoit for the first time, I'm really encouraged that the industry is taking similar paths and strides. So, decentralized model similar to what Benoit was describing, with the corporate office providing some guidance. So the guidance we get from corporate is everybody needs to comply to a minimum standard. For us, for safety, it comes to 45,001, the ISO standard. And after that, we get to articulate what our safety system can be called and labeled, and how it connects to the humans that are in the area. What, for example, inside ISO 45001 describes around having a fatality prevention program. And if you have a fatality prevention program, what things inside there do you have to have? Clearly articulates what you need, and then we are allowed in a decentralized model to sort of come up with the solutions that best fit our unique circumstance based on the geographic region that we operate in, both respecting culture as well as the maturity of the organization. So it's nice to see.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Maybe with that, Michelle, we'll go to the first poll question. And, you know, we've used the term visible felt leadership. We've got it in the survey here. And you know, just to clarify, it's around the presence of people in the field, not managing or, you know, dictating what's going on, but actually listening to people, getting an understanding of what they need to do, what's going on, what's the processes, how they can improve their people, the people's processes or what they need. And so, you know, I want to make sure we don't see this as strictly a top-down management. It's about a presence in the field, so everybody gets to communicate what's going on at the lowest level within the organization, close to where the work takes place. So on that note, you know, the question is, how often should, not the supervisors, because they're in there every day, but the supervisors of supervisors, or up in the organizational hierarchy, how often should they be underground to really demonstrate this visible felt leadership, or get an understanding of what's going on in their workplace? And so turn that to the audience now to present the results as they're coming in. And it's a pretty even draw as we look through this. So we'll give a few more seconds for other people to respond. But think about that. Like, if you were running an operation and you've got this set up, how often would you want your, we'll call them superintendents for this example, to be in the field during a week? And you know, John, you've been through this role, so you can give it from how often you were down in the field, or as managing superintendents, how often you would like to see them in there. I was in this before, and times have changed, which makes it much more difficult to have that presence in the field. And Benoit, you from the safety aspect know the benefits of this. And so we'll shut the survey down now, but we can see through the results. You know, 13, the highest percentage was 4 or 5 days a week, which is difficult to do with all the demands that are on there. To next to 2 to 3 days a week, and 1 being the lowest answer. But you know, I do think a presence in the field is important, and how to do that. And one of the things, you know, with the increase in technology and the increase in data availability, a lot of people are looking to the computer, the emails for the data, and it takes a lot of time away from their ability to get in the field. And I think it's important, you know, not just for visible felt leadership, but to get down to understand the process and to talk to people, you know, getting into the field 2 to 3 times a week, if possible. You know, for my personally, I see the audience results were that or even higher. John, Benoit, your thoughts on that?
I could go first, Benoit. For myself, I think not getting into role titles, but probably the third level in an organization, you'd want to see the frontline leader in the field at least 3 times during a regular work week. Obviously appreciating that, you know, some of our industries have fly in, fly out operations. So I'm just speaking on average. And then the next layer up, I would also expect to have that as well, because that layered interactive discussion needs to happen from the top down. However, I'd also like to put an asterisk when it comes to visible felt leadership. it does matter to attend lineups. And you have to actually block the time off in your calendars and agendas. Otherwise, that time just dissolves, and you can't make up visible felt leadership. So for myself, being intentional, blocking it off on the calendar to at least have a prescribed amount. And one thing I found successful in the past is typically people will have larger areas of accountability when they're at that third level in an organization. And being in the field, for example, when you know you have a meeting, you might be able to go see a hoist room where it's not going underground for an entire morning or an entire day. And I do also think that going in on off shifts for visible felt leadership matters as well, because it allows you to respect and show people that you know that people are in there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thanks, Benoit.
Yes, well, on my side, for the first level of supervision, on our side, we expect at our side to target 2 visits per day. So the frontline supervisor to see their employees. So that's the target. Depending of the site, the reality, the distance they have to do. So again, I don't believe one size fits all solution is the best approach to try to compare site between site. But from the frontline supervisor, the approach is really based on, yes, observation of work methodology and after the interaction they have and try to create an impact with the worker. So for the frontline supervisor, that's what we target. And for the management team, the reality, like John mentioned, it depends. We have fly-in, fly-out operation. We have people taking the plane every Monday, working in Nunavut until Thursday, and they are back after. So the reality, they have a lot of traveling there. So I think we need to just put smart target to our people to adjust to their reality. And at every level, we should have something in place. But again, on our side, we focus a lot with the frontline supervisor, and I will talk a little bit later about the approach we have to have a good impact in the field. But yes, management team, frontline supervisor, yes, it's a little bit what we have.
Yeah, and John, I like your point around the presence just isn't necessarily going underground, the hoist room or lineups. And it made me think, like, even if individuals are going through training, what are the opportunities you as a leader can get in to see people at different aspects of what they're doing? Training is a great example of how you could do that as well too. So thanks for opening our eyes to the different opportunities to do that. I mean, one thing for me when I was getting underground as a superintendent or as a manager, part of it was talking to the crews, but the other part was coaching the supervisors, which I think is an important thing. And I always found it awkward somewhat because to do that, you need to let them lead the discussion. So when you go into the workplace, the workers are expecting you as the superintendent or manager to be leading the discussion, but I always wanted the superintendent to have his normal discussion so I can see how they go and provide some coaching on that and see the opportunities. So it was a difficult role to balance, but I think it helped to develop the supervisors quite a bit to provide that coaching. And so Benoit, you mentioned about supervision and their leadership and their strengths. Is there something at Agnico that happens or that takes place to help develop the supervisors for their effectiveness in the field?
Yes, but on our side, we are in the process to standardize the approach we have directly in the field. So in the Quebec region, we have the supervision formula. So it's similar than the 5-point system you can have in Ontario. So and the coaching in the field, like you mentioned, by the managers to have field interaction and to apply properly our supervision system. That's what we are doing. So to have an impactful interaction in health and safety with the workers by reinforcing the right behavior. So we push a lot for the 4-1, 4 positive reinforcement for 1 opportunity of improvement. So that's really the positive approach we try to have. So the target on our side, it's with the supervision formula, it's to have 2 coaching per year. So supervisor receive a coaching by a GS or a management directly in the field. And some sites right now are doing coaching to the employees as well, on how we should apply our system. So it's interesting. So you have your manager doing a coaching to the frontline supervisor on the way to apply and have a good interaction. And after that, you have also at some sites, the supervisor coaching the workers on how to apply the system we have in the field. So that's one of the things. One of the other thing we have is our supervisor follow a leadership development program provided by the management team. So the program have 5 different modules. So one is communication, leading with courage, coaching, inspiring your team, and safety leadership. So I think what makes the difference of that program compared to other leadership program I saw in the past is probably the fact that the training is provided at 100% by the management team. So the impact on the employees, having the management team delivering the message on how we expect they apply their leadership in the field, contribute to the success of the initiative for sure. So right now, the initiative is in place in our Mexico operation, Quebec and Nunavut, and we are looking to extend the initiative. So, and maybe the last point I can talk about. So on our side, we developed a competency dictionary based on competency our leaders at different level can work to have the knowledge they need to realize their objectives. So that can be on safety focus, that can be on collaboration, influencing, composure. So usually how it works, the manager target 1 or 2 competency, and over the year they work at it together, and the development is based on field experience, coaching, and training. So it's few things we have in place that's helped our supervisor to have a good leadership in the field. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks, John. Anything to add on that one?
Yeah. Yeah, so we spoke a lot about visible felt leadership, and obviously Benoit mentioned some of the leadership development programs they're doing, as well as the mandatory, I think, provincial leadership skill sets that are sort of legislated in the province, which I think is positive for an industry to be moving forward. One of the things to help support our home safe every day and our culture towards moving towards interdependency, we've also sort of bolstered our home safe every day with an HR program called Mining Your Potential. And the intention of that program is to have a somewhat removed group of people that actually invest in our frontline leaders, in addition to the line leadership. So the line leadership is developed on speaking the same language, so that when they go in the field, they can, the supervisors and or joint health safety committee members, because there's lots of different safety leaders in an organization, they all have the same language, and the people that we have mentoring our frontline supervisors, their sole job is to make those supervisors the best they can be. And so we have people that actually shadow them for their entire shift. Some have experience in frontline activities, and some have experience in just interacting with people. So it's really focusing on investing in the frontline employees, which ultimately invests in our overall safety program. So I think similar to what Ben was doing, yeah, you can't just expect people to be good at something. You have to invest in helping them get to where we need them to be.
Perfect, John and Benoit. Great explanation, and great on Agnico for the program that gets set up. I think back to when I was a frontline supervisor, and I started out with the example of having to get the workplace ready and clean for a safety professional coming in when I was very young in the career. But the coaching I got, from my superintendents as I was going out, what to do, how to improve things, changed that mentality to the realization around, that's what you need to be doing every day, and assume that the safety professionals coming in every day, that's how you keep the workplace in the best condition it is, keeps your employees safe, and actually improves production. To the point, and I still remember this, along the journey of coaching, which I think is so important, one of my superintendents said to me, they're like, okay, I don't want you to wear muckers anymore. I want you to go to leather boots. Because if we truly want to get rid of water in this workplace and make sure that there's no standing water anywhere, by having leather boots, you'll be more inclined to understand it and to deal with it, versus putting in a fail safe of wearing your muckers so you don't notice it. So just coaching like that and little things you learn from people who've been in the industry for so long, as a new supervisor really helps and provides some benefit. So, and, so we spent a little bit, half hour now, half the webinar pretty much talking about leadership, felt engagement, coaching, as a leading safety activity. So I think we can say, it's one of the key areas for a leading activity that needs to happen within a safety plan. But I think there's a lot of other, leading activities that can take place that are going to help to improve it as well too. So not by any means discounting the benefit of visible felt leadership. We think that's critical. I think it's critical, as do both of you, from what you discussed and how your organizations are preparing their supervisors to manage and supervise in the workplace. But what else could you give for examples of leading activities that can be done to help improve the overall safety of a mine and bring us closer to zero harm? And John, maybe I'll start with you and then lead it over to Benoit after.
Yeah, okay. I want to use acronyms, so try not to, John. So if I say any acronyms, just coach me and I'll make sure I'm clearly articulating. I think for myself, leading indicators, as the industry evolves into them, lots of effort has been done qualitatively to sort of get the numbers up. So the business right now and the industry, I find, is really starting to focus on quality, not quantity. And some of those indicators have been tracked and recorded and inputted for 2 years now. And we're at the point where we're really starting to see a lot of positive safety information that we can actually use those leading indicators to help guide, for example, next year's safety plan, how we're guiding the budgeting process for putting critical controls in place based on what our high risk exposures, high risk events, and some of the visible felt leadership, what it's seeing in the field. And so for myself, I guess the evolution, and I'm assuming all industry is doing this, is starting to use that data to benefit how we're moving it as an organization. And oftentimes when I speak budgeting process, I think when I refer to budgeting process, it's this strategy that we have for the upcoming years, so 26, 27, and 28, when we're looking at that. And not everything needs to be fixed by money. So for myself, what continuous improvements projects are we putting in place to improve conditions where these things are, where events are occurring and or exposure has been noted? And then the other piece is around how we're using those leading indicators to actually engineer out the actual exposure. So measuring against exposures rather than the high potential event. Because if we have the exposure, and for myself, the difference between a high risk event and a high risk exposure, vehicle, potential high pot. Well, 2 vehicles almost struck, or they did strike. Going in and looking at the high risk exposure and understanding what controls you can put in place to prevent that from happening. For example, collision avoidance, proximity detection. So prevent the vehicles from actually, so that's sort of where we're going as an organization. I think the industry is as well, and just sort of putting controls in place for the exposure rather than waiting for the events to happen. So truly using the data that's been collected over the last few years.
Great, thanks, John. Benoit, anything for you?
Yes, maybe just to add, yes, for that question, what are the other leading indicators? They are important to look at. So maybe one initiative I want to share with you, and we have something in place in one of our Nunavut operations since 4 years now. We call it the Key to Your Safety is You. It's a behavior-based safety program. Very simple, but it's based on if you see something, say something, do something. And that can be reinforcing something someone did well. That can be to intervene when you see an unsafe situation. So I think that contributes to reinforce the safe behavior and the safety culture in general. And when we started that initiative, it was interesting because we put a QR code at different place. And we never explained what it was. And the worker just start to scan the QR code, and they start to fill the small questionnaire about their interaction they did in safety. And so I think we need to find the way to create that culture of safety and that type of activity to help involve the workers and reinforce the importance to have those interactions. So So it's an example on how to involve your workers in that. Sometimes we look at leading indicator more at the staff level and the field interaction, but how to involve the worker, that can be a good example. And maybe a last one, and it's maybe not usual to measure but that kind of thing, but I believe that can have an impact on well-being of our people, and in the same time prevent incident. And it's easier to think about that example in the context of fly-in fly-out operation. So when I was working in Nunavut, the life at the camp was okay, but we saw an opportunity to make it better. So we decided to hire the mental health, uh, not a mental health, a recreational specialist. And I think many remote sites now have that type of position in place. And mental health is an important part to consider in our operation right now. And we should think about leading indicator related to that. So mental health first aid training, we provide awareness campaign, peer support activities, but also measuring the activity we are doing at site, like activities we should consider to include, like I don't know, the yoga activity, basketball, bingo, or whatever it is. So that kind of thing, I think it's contribute to have a good morale at site. People are happy. Maybe we'll reduce incident as well. So measuring that kind of soft things, I think, can make a difference also to make sure our people are happy and they feel great, and probably contribute to have a safe place to work and a better mental health as well.
Yeah, perfect, Benoit. Thanks. And we should have had this one before. So anybody that didn't listen to last webinar, the safety share 2 months ago, it was on mental health. You can get those through YouTube. Go back and watch it, because I think what Benoit's saying is really true, and everybody's agreeing with this now. Health and safety is one aspect, but mental health is definitely another key driver for overall performance and safety and well-being of our workforces. So if you want to go back, you can catch all the old safety shares through YouTube on previous laid out. Yep. I'll just list a couple more for me on leading activities in the safety plans. And one of the things, and I mentioned already, is interactive audits. It was the biggest driver for me through my career, having those open-ended discussions and discussing what could be or what are the difficulties with the individuals, not just what does it look like now in the workplace, but over the past, or what do you perceive to see that's going to come about that can cause problems or has caused you problems in the past. Helps you to get away from just what today's conditions look like. And so I think interactive audits is one of the big ones for me. The other thing that I think is important is that safety plans don't have to be all the same across an organization. And I get to the technical services aspect of it. I think it's important for a safety plan that gets them underground and home safe every day. But I've got a concept, we've discussed, and it's well within the industry, called prevention through design. How do we get the engineers that are designing stuff to put safety into that? How do we get them to do leading activities on the designs they do? How do they get into the workplace and maybe have audits and visits with operations to discuss what was good, what was bad, what could be different in a maintenance shop or in a sump, so that when you design the next sump, you're looking at how to make these changes different. And so I really think that looking at your ops planners, your technical staff, and getting safety plans and leading activities for them that they can do that might be different than your frontline supervisors is also very important. And the other big takeaway for me that I didn't have is how to bring change management into your safety plan. I'm still very, very impressed by that pillar, Benoit. So great on you for that one. So those are just some of the examples of what can go into a safety plan. Michelle, maybe as you're calling up the next question, poll survey, we'll get from the listeners. We've got 4 examples of things that you think could be beneficial in a safety plan as far as leading activities, excluding visible felt leadership, which we talked about. But if you want to fill it out on there and give us what you think some of the important ones would be, appreciate that. We always want to put in others, but it's too hard to do on a poll survey. So please select one of the 4 that you think is most fitting. And talking about questions, please remember to put in the chat any of questions that you have for the panelists as we go through and continue this webinar. We're looking to gain and provide information and knowledge to the industry as a whole from the experts we have on the panel. So your questions will be very helpful. So please put them in the chat and ask the questions as we're going through. We'll look to address them as it goes on. All right, we'll give it another couple of seconds for some more responses from the audience.
John, just while we're waiting for that, one thing
Yeah.
I was thinking about when you were talking there, and Benoit was talking as well, the completely agree with all the leading safety indicators. I think one thing I'm starting to appreciate more and more, just having been relatively new to Manitoba, is how do you get people who haven't, I guess, normalized the conditions in your site to perform those SIF and frontline visible felt leadership activities, and how do you get cross-boundary activities happening where people who normally aren't in an area can have a healthy conversation and challenge each other, just because it's so easy to get into a normalized state, and because every day that condition just slightly gets worse and you may not appreciate it when you're in it.
Yeah, no, great point. And, just on that, John, like it's caring for one another. So how do you do that without getting defensive? If you're the one being cared for, without getting defensive and taking task and then creating an attitude that stops that person from sharing again what they think is important. And I think that's one of the biggest things within a workplace, is having that ability for one another to openly share what they think could help or could cause harm to people, and not being defensive about it. So thanks. And so, yeah, if we look at the results, again, a pretty mixed result. Process hazard analysis being the biggest one. And I think, having a structured approach to doing that is very beneficial. But I also think having, I'll call it less of a structure, but more frequency in the workplace, looking at how processes are done, analyzing that would also provide some benefit. Just, Benoit, any results that stand out to you from this or from your experience at Agnico?
Yes, yes, one thing I will say, they are all important. If you look at the choice we have right now, our main focus on our site is on the management of our major hazard. So, and the management of critical control. So process hazard analysis right now, it's probably the one we are focusing as a corporation. All the sites had something in place to manage hazard in the past, but now we are revamping the approach. Yes, with the use of the bow tie methodology, and 2025 for us was the implementation and the training and the beginning of doing the bow tie. So some sites are more in advance than other in their journey in risk management, but all our sites are moving forward in that direction. Our goal right now, it's not to rush everything. It's really to work well in the implementation of the bow tie, and yes. So in our journey right now, it's really process hazard analysis, the focus. It's not something new, but with the critical control management for us, it's new for the majority of the sites, and that's where we are focusing right now. Try to standardize that approach, and after that, become better and better in the management of the critical control. So it's mostly where we are focusing right now, and all of the choice we are seeing on that question are all good. And ICAM, for us, we are working very hard for have qualities in the ICAM we are doing. It's not only using the methodology, but we are doing coaching, and we are working with a third party to become better. So I think it's all good answers. But for Agnico right now, the biggest two aspects we are focusing as a corporation, it's mostly, yes, our major hazard process and the quality of our ICAM. It's for us a priority we have in the pipeline right now.
All right, thanks, Bill. John, anything you want to add? Or?
Yeah, I wouldn't prioritize one over the other, but if I group them on how, like, my mind's working. Like I look at, you know, the workplace inspections and the safety shares or lunchbox talks are sort of more associated with what I know now as an individual. Oftentimes, like there's group discussions that happen in workplace inspections and safety shares. However, when you get into these process hazard analysis and the ICAM, which are sort of grouped together, it's a chance to actually take a step back and understand on your hierarchy of controls, like where can you actually change how things are being done and performed. And the ones, I guess, the workplace and safety box talks, it's here's what you need to put in place that we know of now. So for myself, I think they're both required, but one is more of, again, just moving on that curve and maturity and actually challenging, because oftentimes those are intentional discussions around, do we have this right? Can we do this differently? Where a workplace inspection is, these are the conditions I expect, this is the standard that we've established, and we're not working within it, or we are, and we're acknowledging you. So it's just, in my mind, two different avenues, and I think all four of them are critical for an organization.
Perfect, thanks. And I got a lot more questions that we're going to ask, but we've got a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So we're going to go. We'll cut my questions short, and we'll go back to the ones from the audience. And Benoit, I'll start with one for you, because the question was on, you know, there's been lots of discussion about monetary incentives for safety achievements. You talked about, you know, putting leading activities as part of the incentive system. Do you think it's right? Is there a risk to it? What's your thoughts? And John, I'll let you add after Benoit talks about the Agnico.
Yeah, if they have a risk to associate health and safety bonuses, that's the question.
Yeah, like if you put a bonus associated with that, isn't there a risk to it? What is that risk, and are there concerns?
Yeah, no, I'm agreed, and I know where you go with that. And as a safety professional, it's always it is a good thing to associate bonus to health and safety. And yeah, I'm not sure it's always the best thing to do. The only thing I know in the past, and it was historically it was like that in the company, so it was always based on lagging indicator at 100%. So now I'm in that position since a year now, so we try to change a little bit that approach, and so we were able to push for the leading indicator. So now the company still want to continue to provide bonuses. It is the right way to do it. Good question. But the way we took was really to move more to provide bonuses in health and safety, but based more on leading indicators. So I think it's interesting. It is the best thing to do. I don't know, but still improvement from what we were doing before, I think.
Perfect. John?
Yeah, for myself, I think historically there was always this concern around, if you start awarding people for safety performance based on lagging indicators, you could potentially have, and especially when the entire group is awarded together, for example, a mine site, an area, a division, you would often, because the unintended consequence, would you be hiding things to match the requirement to achieve that whatever widget is that you know you've set as a target to give people? I think how the positive recognition has changed is around similar to what Ben was describing around, you know, leading indicators, positive recognition, personal performance. So I now, my performance underground and the risks I take or don't take won't impact how everybody else gets paid and remunerated. So for myself, I think getting into the more leading indicators and the positive recognition and acknowledgement, I think is definitely the way to go, and doing it in a way that's meaningful for the employees. Yeah.
Perfect. So the next question is a really specific one, and I like it. So, you know, with a Visible Felt Leadership Program, what are some key questions you could ask frontline supervisors? And so before I turn it over to John, then Benoit, I'll give my response to that. So think about, you know, what's something in the field you could be asking. And one of the questions I always like to ask was, you know, when I'm in there with a worker, if I was to tell you your cross shift got hurt yesterday in this workplace, you know, what do you think that injury would be? And what do you think as an organization we could have done to prevent it? And so it doesn't make the individual defensive. We're talking about something hypothetical, but it lets them discuss what are some of the key risks they have in their mind and share with you. Plus, it helps what could the organization do to prevent it. So for me, I think that's one of the questions I like that helps to show visible felt leadership and get to some potential solutions to reduce injuries. John, and then Benoit.
Yeah, John, mine would have been similar to yours, John. So for myself, I find the easiest way to connect with people in the field around visible felt leadership is actually taking a step back and realizing that you don't know what you don't know. And when you're having those conversations in the field, either on a McLean bolter or some mechanized piece of equipment, asking them if they were to train somebody new, similar to your thing about a little different angle. If you were to train somebody new on this, what would you want them to know that you've had to learn either the wrong way or you've heard other people learn of? And then the other one would be is around, I find it's people often want to share things that they're experiencing in the field, conditions that may be left for them. And so how do you ask them, you know, have there been instances where you've come in and safety devices have been bypassed? And it's not like you're looking to go out and you can't. So you have to create that room for the person to share with you that things aren't normal all the time, and just have them walk through some of how historically, not asking for a specific event, some of those things, for example, whisker switches being bypassed, and just opening it up for them to be human. And you can't take disciplinary action from that because you're trying to create a culture. You're trying to change and learn. Yeah.
Benoit?
Yes, on my side, when I want to have a good impact in terms of field interaction, and I talk a little bit about the four positive reinforcement and one opportunity of improvement, and I do it in French. It sounds better, maybe, but I do my sympathetic noodle. So when I just ask the question for the people because I know the answer the most of the time. Okay? And but I want to hear the worker talk about it, and that. And sometimes it's not easy to interact with people in health and safety. And I coach the manager to sometimes just use that simple question and talking and introduce with the worker. It is safe what we are doing right now because I don't really know what we are doing at that specific moment. When you arrive at the workplace, it's probably a bolter maybe, but what he is doing right now when you arrive at that time, that's what is interesting for you. And ask him the question, maybe he parked his vehicle. That's what he's doing now. And it is safe what you did. And why? The why made the difference. And at that time, the worker just start, and at the beginning, the workers are, yes, it is, and I will tell you why it is, and that's the goal of the conversation. He will talk about all the good thing he's doing. It's safe because I pass in front of the crosscut before to make sure they have nobody there before I park my vehicle. I have my top flasher. I have my seat belts and so on. So at that time, you talk about all the good thing he's doing. And after that, what I do and our approach is really, okay, perfect. I will reinforce all those simple things he did to show him it's important, those small things, and that can make the difference. So for me, field interaction, the why make a huge difference when you ask your question. It is safe, and why it's safe. And at that time, you learn about the job he's doing, and he talk about again and again the good thing he is doing. So it's maybe a simple tip you can use when you go in the field.
Yeah. Perfect. Next question actually goes back to the overall program, and it talks about conditions are always changing, hazards are dynamic, not just in one workplace, but in a mine overall. And so how do you know that the employee conversations and the safety metrics you're using are identifying the true hazards within your workplace? And so it's a really good question. It's on a broader scale. But I think I'll turn it, Benoit, to you and then to John. So again, how do you know that the conversation and the safety metrics you're using in your organization are truly identifying the hazards? And I think, for me, Benoit, before I turn it to you, there's two ways to do that. One is you know, are you addressing the lagging indicators, and are they being reduced from whatever you focus your program on? But in the leading activities, what are the major items that you're trying to control? And I really do like high potential. Next month, we're going to talk about significant incident fatalities. Like, how do you take what used to be the conical Phillips triangle that talks about the levels going from near misses to fatalities, and bridge that down to what are the key ones you truly need to focus on to make sure you don't have significant injuries or fatalities in your organization. And to me, that's where the focus needs to go. So, you know, Benoit, what about you? How do you know if the conversation and the safety metrics are truly working on the true hazards within your workplace? And then John, you.
It's a good question. On our side, we start to measure leading indicator, and as a corporate level, we have so many different software in the company right now. So to connect everything together at the level I am right now, to make sure I know if what the site are measuring, if it's the right thing we are measuring, and if our activities have an impact at the corporate level right now, with all the merge and acquisition, to have the big picture of what we have, it's quite challenging. So honestly, maybe I will let John go. I will think about it, but yeah.
Yeah, for myself, John, I think oftentimes we want to have answers, and I would suggest our hypotheses are generally directionally correct. So I think when we establish our safety plans and our objectives for the year, we have data that supports where we're going. And what we're recently trying to do with that data that, you know, Benoit has been talking about around visible felt leadership, SIF audits, inspections, high potential incidents, and the other one that we transitioned to around the high risk exposures that we're measuring. We are creating metrics that get given on a set frequency based on layers in the organization, monthly to the area superintendent, so they can course correct. So generally, we're telling them this is what we're seeing with the leading indicators. You know, are you going to do anything differently with your safety plan, and allowing them to have the agility and ability to modify that as things change. Because just like the I guess where the question came in from, our workplaces are dynamic. It's not a static plan. And for myself, at a quarterly level, sort of the managers and general managers are getting involved, and at a quarterly / annual level, a different layer in the organization, directionally, is the ship still going in the right way around our goal of zero harm? And so for myself, we're always course correcting through the year and giving the ability for people to do that.
Great. We've got one last question, and I'm going to answer myself just because of time. But it says, you know, as a safety leader, you know, what are the key leading indicators that you think should be tracked or reported to show the effectiveness of the program? And, you know, I'll start with saying compliance to the safety plan is a measure of that leading activity. And then within that safety plan, whatever your activities are, compliance to that in there as well also. So it's really activities getting completed, with the safety plan being the big one. And so we're 2 minutes from the hour. Like I said, we had lots of questions. Apologize for those that we weren't able to get them addressed. But Michelle, I'll turn it back to you just to wrap us up.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Benoit and John. Also, a special thanks to Hudbay Minerals for sponsoring today's episode of the Safety Share. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and ask that you please fill out the short survey that pops up on your screen at the close of the webinar. A link of the video recording of this webinar will be mailed to you tomorrow. We hope you will join us for the next episode of the Safety Share on December 4th, which will cover SIF prevention, the SIF prevention initiative. A link to register will be in your email tomorrow. We hope to see you there, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.